River. Adam Kohler, thanks Tammy. Adam Kohler is our interim program director for the Upper Adolescent. So Upper Adolescent is 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So welcome to our virtual back to school night. Also, I'm Stacy Krieger, she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Administration at Great River. I'm kind of moderating and running the Q&A. So if you have a question to ask, we really ask that you not put it in the chat because it's really hard to track if we'd answered it or not. Instead, use the Q&A function along the bottom of the screen. And there was a comment in our last group that there isn't the ability with webinars to turn on closed captioning like there is with a normal Zoom meeting. And so we have the little option at the bottom, but it doesn't actually let us do it. So what we'll do is we'll retake this recording of this meeting and put it up on YouTube. And then you can use YouTube's embedded closed captioning if you need that extra accessibility. So I apologize for not having it available live. Adam, you can take it over from here. You should have the ability to share your screen if you have a spreadsheet.
Thanks, Stacy.
Spreadsheet, a PowerPoint, whatever, one of those things.
I know what you meant. One real quick thing, Stacy, before I start, Lindsay Weaver is here and had a couple slides to talk about IB stuff. Can you make her a panelist so that she can?
I will make her a panelist right now.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Adam Kohler. I use he, him pronouns. I am the interim Upper Adolescent Program Director this year. Really excited to be taking on this role and helping us transition into the UA program this year. There's a lot of changes and a lot of things that we're just clarifying and doing the things that we've been doing really well for many years and just making it, just returning back to them as well. So let me get my slideshow up and ready. Oops. Share my screen. I was so good at this about a few months ago, and now it feels like it's a skill that went away quickly. So it's interesting to come back to presenting information over Zoom. Okay, so this is the fall 2021 Upper Adolescent Orientation. We're going to be talking about general information that will help you get into school and help us understand sort of the structures about what's going to be happening for this school year. But before we do that, I think it's important to have a land acknowledgement. Our school site is located on Dakota and Ojibwe land. And if you're coming to us from the metro area, you are likely on land that was originally Dakota and Ojibwe land. A land that is rich with deep history. A land acknowledgement is a small action, but it is an action at least that we can do in this moment. So I just want to make that acknowledgement. If you're interested in learning more about this site, badotememorymap.org is very informational. Next, I want to welcome David Nunez. So David, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role and who you are and what you're doing for Great River this year.
So thank you, Adam. So yes, I'm David Nunez. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the interim head of school this year at Great River. So excited to welcome you to this new school year. You should know that everybody has been working super hard at Great River over the last days and weeks. And we all really can't wait to welcome your students back to the building next week. It is the excitement is palpable in the air. I'm new, of course, at Great River. Most of you, I'm sure, know that. I started on July 1st. It's been a really great 2 months to be at Great River, to get to know people, to meet staff, to meet students who were around this summer during summer camps and summer programming was wonderful as well. And then I'm also excited to share, you're all familiar with Sam's role as head of school previously. And so you probably have a sense of what my role is in the building in terms of I answer to the board and I work with the program directors to manage the school generally. But I'm excited to share that I'm not just the head of school. I'm also soon going to be a Great River parent. So my son is joining in the 7th grade this year, and my stepchild, as of just a short time ago, will be joining as a 6th grader this year at Great River as well. So I'm super excited to be joining the community in multiple ways. One thing I wanted to share real quick with you all this evening is our communication plan for the year. And it just seemed like a really good opportunity to sort of let you know what the plan is. And so I'll try to be as succinct as I can and get back to Adam and everything he has to share. But Great River, of course, knows that a lot of the equity-focused work we do is to ensure students and caregivers feel well informed about happenings at the school. That's really deeply important to us. And so we communicate using a couple different channels. First of all, we have announcement blogs. These were a thing last year. They continue to be a thing. The announcement blogs you can get to on our website specifically, or just type in greatriverschool.org/announcements. And we regularly update this page with non-urgent school announcements, upcoming events, activities, volunteer opportunities, things along those lines. And this year we're using an email service, an email feed specifically to send those announcements to your email daily. Now, just to be clear, because it is a new thing, we are opting all the families in. So what that means is you will start receiving emails based on the information that's been put on the blogs. On these level specific announcements, they'll reach your email daily. If you don't want to receive these emails daily, you can unsubscribe using the link at the bottom of the email without any trouble, and then just check the blog periodically, I would recommend at that point, but that is totally up to you. The announcements blogs are separated by elementary, lower adolescent, and upper adolescent. So there's 3 of them. And if you're not receiving updates and you want to, reach out to office at Great River School. It's a great school at greatriverschool.org, and we can troubleshoot. It's possible that we have out-of-date information for you or something along those lines. You're also going to receive direct emails from the school. In the case of any sort of urgent communication, you might receive a direct email from me, from Stacy Krieger, or possibly from Great River School specifically, with more information on whatever that urgent communication is. And then there's also the family newsletters. So last year, the family newsletters came at different frequencies throughout the year. We're going back to the original plan of offering a monthly newsletter to families. And usually the plan is to have these come out on the first Monday of the month, with some exceptions, depending on the calendar and where we are in the school year. But the newsletters are to feature student accomplishments, events at the school. And if you don't receive those messages, again, reach out to office at greatriverschool.org in order to make sure your information is updated. Lastly, there's also social media opportunities. Great River School maintains a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account. And we don't maintain or supervise the GRS family Facebook pages, but there are several of them, and they're a great resource for connecting with other families in the community. So Great River School community page specifically deals with all levels. And then there's a Great River School elementary parents page, a Great River School lower adolescent parents, and a Great River School upper adolescent parents page. So I think that's all I have to say to start out with, but I'm going to hand the metaphorical mic back to Adam, and then also stay on and be available. I'm sure there'll be questions as we move through the presentation, and if I can answer any of them, I'll jump in and do that. So, but Adam, back to you.
Thank you, David. So just a quick overview of what the Upper Adolescent program is. So it is grades 10 through 12. We've got a team of roughly 20 staff members. That includes general education guides, special education guides, and education assistants, interventionists, and other support staff. There's roughly 200 students. And when we think about sort of the programmatic features, it's a program that blends academic growth, social skills, and community engagement to help students become engaged community members in and out of school. That's sort of the main focus when we think about the UA program. In terms of where that fits in with our Montessori pedagogy, we think about it in terms of the third plane, excuse me. So when Montessori was doing her theorizing about adolescent development or young people development in children, she thought of this period, the adolescent period, as mostly a period of developing a social sense, a social identity. She thought this period was an important period for belonging, for self-focus, independence, concerns for society. She used the phrase social newborn when we think about the ages of 12 to 18, students really coming into their identity of who they are. And so we prioritize and create programs to help students in that development. An interesting sort of little tidbit, when Maria Montessori was theorizing her thoughts, her pedagogy, she thought that adolescence was very similar to infancy. And so in some programs, they actually have the adolescent programs and the child house programs very close to each other because they had similar needs, which I just think is a funny bit of Montessori trivia. In terms of the GRS lexicon, that we use a lot of terms here that become so normal when you're in the building and we've been here for a while, but if you're new to the school or if you just need a refresher, there's a lot of terms and words that would be helpful to know. So first off, advisory. It's basically homeroom, but it's so much more. It's the place for social emotional learning, building an intentional small community. The advisor is the person who students can go to when they're not quite sure who else to ask. That's the purpose of advisory. CAS stands for Creativity, Action, and Service. CAS is a program that comes out of the IB program, and we ask all students grades 7 through 12 to do it, and we'll learn a little bit later about what it looks like in the upper adolescent program specifically. Key experiences. We do several key experiences throughout the school year. In the fall, there is usually the key experience trip. We're altering that this year, and I'll tell you more about what that will look like. But we also do spring intensives in the spring, and I'll tell you more about what that looks like as well this year. But key experiences are community building experiences, experiential experiences for students to develop. So we had the fall community building, and doesn't want to go. Whoa. It went too fast. There, I'll just put them all up. So I mentioned the fall community building and then the spring intensives. Those are experiential learning activities during the final week of school. There's also independent work, or sometimes referred to as indie work. It is a gradual buildup from a guided work cycle to an independently constructed use of time, builds self-directed learning and project management skills. The easiest equivalent to it would be study hall, but it's not study hall. It's not quite the same thing. It is helping students use their time well to be able to manage themselves and be independent learners. Going on and thinking more specifically about the IB program. So IB stands for International Baccalaureate. It is a program that's run through schools throughout the world. IB programs run from very young ages to older ages. At Great River, we just have the IB program in the 11th and 12th grade. And a feature of that program is the IBDP, or the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. So all students in 11th and 12th grade are taking IB level courses. They are college level courses. In those courses, they can sit in exams, usually in the spring and some that are happening throughout the year, to try and test into getting higher course credit that could be seen as college credit if students go on to college. But there is this special program, the IBDP, that includes an extra class and some extra requirements. And it looks great for post high school experiences. Part of that requirement is the extended essay, which is a 4,000 word research paper that requires students to complete a research question of their choosing, and they work with a staff member at school. Another component of the IBDP is the Theory of Knowledge course, also known as TOK. It's a required course for students in the diploma program, but it is open as an elective for all students. It focuses on how knowledge and truth are constructed in different subject areas. And we have actually Lindsay Weaver in the room here with us, who is the IB director. So if there's anything else you want to add to that, Lindsay?
No, you did a great job. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be working with your students, and you'll hear a little bit from me a little later on about 11th and 12th grade CAS this year. Back to you, Adam.
Thanks, Lindsay. All right, next we should talk about what kinds of support exist at school. So we provide general support, like I was saying, in advisory. The advisor is the person for whom your student will have sort of a regular check-in for when they need help to figure out who to talk to about certain things. That person is also the person who will sit in for student-led conferences in the fall and the spring. But there are many other people at our school whose job it is to just generally support students. The first person I want to point you towards is Seth Tupper, who's our UA social worker. You've got his email up there. He's a great person to talk to when students are struggling with mental health issues, when they need help solving conflicts and they're not quite sure how to do it, and a lot of other different things. He's a great resource at school. Lisa Steinman is our UA academic interventionist. Her role is to help students who are struggling in particular in giving them interventions to see if they're not getting what they need in the general education course, to provide extra support to help them do well in that general education setting. Teresa Hitchens-Olsen is our director of college access. She is a fantastic support for college access, truly a phenomenal gift to Great River, as all of our staff members. But she is the person to directly talk to about college or post-secondary experiences. And she wanted me to mention that at some point, she will be reaching out to seniors and families and caregivers of seniors to have a specific presentation about getting ready for college, if that's something that you're interested in after high school. Matt McElrath is our Dean of Students. He does many things, including 504 support, disciplinary support, transcript help, and many other things as well. I am the interim UA program director this year. And so great, I'm here pretty much for anything. If I can't give you the answer, I can connect you to the person who does have the answer. But if there are specific questions you have about the program or things that are going on, you can always reach out to me. And then general GRS questions can always be sent to office at Great River School. If there's a question that you're not quite sure who to ask, that's also a great resource to check out. I kind of mentioned this when I mentioned the people, but if you're curious about school supplies, access to food and nutrition, mental and physical health support, accommodations or modifications, support for planning for life after high school, all of these people are going to be great resources. And if you're not quite sure who would fit, you can reach out to me or office. I should have said this at the very beginning. We are recording this presentation. We are recording all the questions that are being asked. And so this presentation has some links in it, and we'll send it out afterwards as well so that you can see these emails and all that. I want to take a moment to just recognize where we are. We are giving this presentation over Zoom and not at school. We are coming back together after a year where people had probably very different experiences. Some people might have had intense struggle, and some people might have actually really enjoyed it. We're in an interesting place where the things that we assumed about education are not necessarily the things we can keep assuming about education. And so that's why we have this giant delta symbol in the middle of the page. If you're a mathematician, you might recognize the symbol delta as being something that represents change or difference in a math equation, but it's also symbolic of the fact that when things are hard or when things change, it's sometimes an opportunity to stop and think about how they could be different. And that is true as well for us at Great River. So we see here on the slide, it says struggles and grief, acknowledging that we've been through it. We've been through a lot these past few months. Some have experienced it more acutely than others. So let's just take a moment to sort of think. I'll give you 10 seconds to think about where are you at right now with coming back to school. This is a question we'll have to keep coming back to over and over again, but it's something that's worth asking about where are we at as we're coming back to school. It can lead to an amazing opportunity, thinking about how we can change the way we teach and learn, thinking about the way that we look at the world. A framework that we used in the Upper Adolescent last year was the work of Viktor E. Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor who, after his experience of trauma, tried to reconceptualize that experience. Is there any other way he can use that experience to think about his life? And so we have a quote from him at the bottom. It says, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice." Now, that's not to say that if you've experienced anything, if any of us have experienced something traumatic in the past year, that we need to think of that as some sort of beneficial thing, but it just sometimes allows us to think about how we want to try and move forward. So that's the purpose of this slide. So let's talk more about those key experiences that I mentioned before. We have 2 specific spots for key experiences in the upper adolescent area. This year, we are not doing overnight key experiences in the fall. We're doing something called the fall community building trips. So we are focusing specifically on one aspect of the trips, which is building relationships between students and guides. There are many things that the key experiences, the overnight key experiences give us, but that's one particular thing that is true across the board. So we're prioritizing that as one of our goals. The way it's going to work is we're going to be doing individual day trips, likely based in grade levels over the course of 4 days, from Tuesday, September 14th through Friday, September 17th. Usually that Friday of the key experiences is a day off, but because of the change, we've added that as a school day. And we'll be doing those day trips from the Tuesday to Friday. One of the reasons that we made this decision was to prioritize in-person learning. The risks that we were noticing that were inherent in the overnight key experiences are things that were getting in the way of that, of prioritizing in-person learning for the entire year. We wanted to make sure that the first thing that we're doing doesn't put that at risk at all. So that's one of the justifications, or one of the things that we thought about in deciding to do these day trips versus an overnight trip, although there were many other conversations that were had when we made that decision. I do want to keep in mind we're running into a very serious logistical thing that we need to make a slight change for. School bus drivers are incredibly hard for us to come by. So 2 of the trips that will be happening will be extended times. It's very hard to find drivers from the usual sort of 8 to 3 time period, but we are able to find drivers from the 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Time period. And so there are 2 of those day experiences, and we'll communicate this ahead of time once we finalize the schedule. That will be that extended daytime. You would still be able to come to school if you need to drop your student off at the regular 8:30 time, but it would be an extended day. And we are working with PEG, the parent engagement group, to figure out carpools for how to make that work. Even though we are not going on overnight trips, we are going off campus for some of these day trips. And so med forms do need to be turned in so that we can best support your students as we're out and about. The other component of key experiences is our spring intensives. These happen the last week of school. They are week-long experiential activities. Usually they're designed by guides. Guides come up with an experience that they can provide that is academic, but not graded per se. It won't show up in our Schoology or Power School or transcript. It is experiential. Anything from filmmaking to yarn bombing to, I think one year there was a trapeze art one, biking, all kinds of experiences. And we usually ask students, what do you want to do? What are some things that you're interested in? And then we design experiences around that. Particular to the UA though, 12th graders have the opportunity to propose independent experiences. We work with an outside consultant named Mari Ruddy, who's a fantastic creative human being who has designed this program for us to be able to help students build that independence, which is in line with our Montessori pedagogy for these 12th grade students to design their own spring intensives. Let's talk about the schedule, the daily schedule. So it is changing this year as we come back to in-person learning. So we are moving to what is sometimes called a block schedule. So you'll notice that the general flow of the day is that 4 days a week we have instruction through a class period, and Wednesdays are sort of they run a little bit different. So the days are broken up into an A day and a B day, and then Wednesdays. An A day happens on Monday and Thursday, and a B day happens on Tuesday and Friday. Within an A day, the typical time period, students will come to school at 8:30, and they'll begin with independent work. They'll begin the school year with their advisor, and then eventually we'll give students choice of what room they want to work in. If your student is in the IBDP program, they'll be in TOK, Theory of Knowledge course, from that 8:30 to 9:10 period. Then from 9:15 to 10:45, we have the first period, 90-minute blocks. And then period 2, advisory is happening from 12:25 to 12:55, and then lunch from 1 to 1:30. They have one final course, and then with whatever course they're in for the end of the day, they'll help clean up that space. So the same courses will meet on Monday and Thursday, and then the same for Tuesday and Friday. Wednesdays are different. It's sort of our day to focus on community and helping students become independent, kind of those two things. So we begin the day in advisory for a little bit more of an extended time. And then we have a community meeting. If you're new to Great River, a community meeting is where students sit in a circle and they follow an agenda to talk about how the week is going for them. It is student-led. Students student voice is heard much more than staff voice. They talk about what's going well that week, what can be improved, if there are any updates to the program, if they see any changes that they want to start orchestrating. It's a really fantastic place for students to start building up leadership. It's usually developed or split up by grade levels, but sometimes we do meet as a large group. Then we move into independent work. Again, like I said before, this is a time period for students to learn how to prioritize their projects, collaborate with other peers, collaborate with their guides, or get any reteaching if it needs to happen. Then we have care of the environments where students are cleaning up their space. And then lunch is a little bit earlier on Wednesday. And then we have CAS, that creativity, action, and service that I mentioned from 1 to 3:10. For 10th grade students, they're going to be on campus and they're going to be joining the 7th through 9th grade students for teacher-led CAS experiences happening at school. For 11th and 12th grade students, they are completing off-campus CAS. And Lindsay's going to tell us more about what that looks like and why we have that as a pedagogical choice. I don't think there's anything else I want to say about the schedule for right now, but just do want to highlight up here in the right-hand corner is a link to the GRS school calendar for what days are off and what days are half days and all that sort of thing, just as a thing to remember.
Adam, can I ask a question that pertains to this slide?
Please.
A question from, I believe it might be a leading question because it's from Holly Bell, our front desk coordinator. If UA classes don't really start until 9:15, can my student do indie work at home until that time?
That is a great question. The answer is not yet. And this is going to be a slide that I'm going to come to. So maybe let's just go there right now. So last year, Melanie Peterson-Nassinger, who was the Upper Adolescent Program Director, had proposed this plan of what we're calling a gradual release. Now, I think I'll just read the slide and then I'll add some thoughts. So towards the end of last year, a plan was proposed that if a student was showing regular success, they would be given the option of working off campus during independent work times. This plan was designed with students, family, and staff input. We have decided to pause on this plan and revisit it for semester 2. The biggest reason for that is this transition from Melanie to myself. When I took over this position, I didn't feel ready to provide that programming decision to the best of its ability. If that transition hadn't happened, maybe we could have done that. But because we made that transition, I see it personally as one of my duties to provide the physical and emotional structure to provide physical and emotional safety for students. And I needed more information and more time to work with guides to make sure that we can do that with that plan. So we're doing a pause on this gradual release plan. We have a couple of lingering questions about what success means and how a student would qualify or not qualify for off-campus independent work time. So we're going to be working this first semester as a staff to clarify those things, come up with a very secure plan, and then revisit that plan for semester 2. I've got a full justification and rationale for why I made this decision, and that link is right here at the bottom, and you can read it. I do want to acknowledge that people put a lot of work into this plan, and they might feel a little bit like, why aren't you doing this thing? We already planned it. I want to acknowledge that work is valid and it's going to be used for further planning, but that if we're going to do this plan, we kind of have one shot. And so I want to do it really well. And that's why I'm pausing on the program or having our team pause before we implement it. And that kind of leads us into off-campus CAS. So Lindsay, why don't you take that?
I have some good news. For 11th and 12th graders out there and 11th and 12th grade families, we have heard loud and clear from both our upcoming 11th and 12th graders and our alums that being off campus for CAS in 11th and 12th grade is really transformational and important. And so that's coming back. And so in late September, all 11th and 12th graders will receive a formal CAS orientation, but we wanted to let you know we are planning to bring back the CAS Wednesday afternoon internship model, where students intern, work, or volunteer in an organization, not with their parents supervising them, on Wednesday afternoons. And Adam, I think you can go to the next slide. Here is really what I would love students and families to start talking about and thinking about. CAS experience for Wednesday afternoons, volunteering, interning, or working, being employed within Great River School or another organization. Those of you in the audience who are awesome student leaders of GSA or Mental Health Awareness Week, those also count for your Wednesday afternoon opportunities, and we're not going to keep you on campus. We trust you to find a coffee shop or a comfy place at your house to do the planning that you need to for those student leadership opportunities. I do want to note that students are not required to do an in-person internship at an organization. Many organizations or student clubs within our school, I could see how we could be creative and make sure that there are opportunities to work remotely depending on the nature of the work. So please, I encourage all families, start thinking, start talking, what might you do on Wednesday afternoons for your CAS Wednesday experience? I do lastly want to make sure you know there's a resource out there. So Adam, if you go to the next slide, we'll try to get this in the chat, or it will be in this presentation when Adam emails it out. We will have some internships already ready to go for students that will be posted in our UA hallway and also on our CAS website for students to look at. And of course, I know some of you are already thinking, I want to plan independently and find your own opportunity, and that's cool too. Adam, back to you, unless there's any other specific questions on that.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right, let's talk about another aspect of something that started last year that we are continuing on, which is standards-based grading. So standards-based grading is an assessment system that intentionally measures students' progress on learning objectives in each course. It is something that is taking up steam more and more across the nation. And we decided after several years of thinking about it and toying with it and piloting it to make the switch for the adolescent program. So it is something that is being done grades 7 through 12. But a great thing to think about is, why would we make this change? One of the biggest reasons is standards-based grading is a more equitable assessment system. What it does is it removes the things that are not actually measuring learning from the grade. So we're not putting in things like late work deductions or handwriting deductions or perceptions of effort deductions from the grade. We're really just focusing on what a student, how a student is actually growing and what they're actually learning. Now, those things are important, being able to turn things in on time and being able to format things correctly and trying to show effort, but we are measuring and supporting those things in other ways besides an actual grade. Another reason is that standards-based grading centers learning and growth as the purpose of assessment. That's the main thing that we're trying to measure, is how well is a student growing and what are they actually learning. The other thing is it forces us as a staff to really place intention on what we want students to know, understand, and do. That seems pretty obvious as guides, but when you're forced to really, really clarify what are the things you're actually wanting to measure and actually wanting to do, it makes us better teachers. And so those are the main reasons that we are thinking about standards-based grading and why we made this switch. But a great question is, what does that actually look like in our day-to-day school experience? So guides are choosing essential learning objectives for courses. They will then measure, after instructing students, they'll measure that with various practice, low stakes practice. They'll do what's called formative assessment, where students get rich feedback about how they're doing. So it's low stakes practice where they get immediate feedback about how they're doing and what they can change to get even better. Then the learning is sort of like a final check with something called a summative assessment. Summative assessments could look very different depending on the course. It could be a test, it could be a project, it could be an essay, it could be a verbal conversation, it could be a discussion. It really depends on the subject and what learning objectives are being measured. But there will be at least one final check to say, where did that student land on that learning objective? When a teacher actually sits down to determine a grade, they're going to look at three things. They're going to look at those learning products, formative and summative assessments, but they're also going to think about classroom observation and student and guide conversations. We can think about all those things, our interaction with the student, to say, where is this student in their learning of a particular objective? Now that might feel incredibly subjective, but all grading assessment systems are subjective. And so this is actually a little bit more clear about the ways that it might be subjective, instead of assuming that some algorithm has zero objectivity, which is just not true. A great question though is, what about if a student is missing some work, or do they get zeros? The question is, we're not giving out zeros for projects, for assignments. That student's going to get supported in other ways. If a student has significant missing work, there might be different things, such as maybe they have required support that they have to connect with the teacher. Maybe they have an assigned indie work seat. Maybe they are going to have a family check every week or every month. Or maybe they have an assigned work plan where they have to do it in a particular format. So we are supporting that executive functioning of being able to turn things in, but it's not necessarily going to show up in the actual grade. We want that grade to be kind of pure for the actual learning. Going a little bit further, we have specific reporting periods. Student conferences, students will tell families and their guides how they're doing in a sit-down conference happening, I think, roughly in October, and then also in the spring. There will also be end of semester grades that are given out. But if you want to check how your student is doing in the middle of the semester or the middle of the quarter, you can always, families and caregivers will have access to Schoology, which is our learning management system, where you can see where a student is at sort of at the moment. But there is this reporting gap that we should be transparent about. When a teacher gives an assignment and then a student gives back their work, it takes some time for a teacher, a guide, to think critically about how that student did and to give feedback. Our expectation, our general expectation, is to have guides update their gradebook every 2 weeks. Sometimes that's really aspirational. When I think about, I should have said this earlier, before taking on the interim role, I was an English guide. Grading 150 papers in 2 weeks is incredibly aspirational. Sometimes I could do it, but I was usually a wreck by the time I did it. So sometimes that gap is a little bit longer depending on the assessment, but we want to try and keep that gap short so that you can get clear updates on how students are doing and students can get updates on how they're doing. I should have said this earlier, but we're using a 1 to 7 scale on all our assignments, our summative assignments and our formative assignments. That 1 to 7 scale, which I'll show you in just a moment, equates to progress. 1 being you're not meeting the objective, and 7 meaning you're exceeding the expectations for that objective. At the end of the semester, we translate that 1 to 7 scale to an A through F scale. The reason for that being, it's helpful for transcripts. When we're communicating this information to people outside of Great River, they're still oftentimes thinking in that A through F scale. And so it's helpful for us to be able to communicate that to people outside of Great River, such as colleges or work experiences after school. So a question that you can think about for yourself is, how could I support my students through this? The first, try and help your student take ownership of this process. Ask them questions that will ask them if they can show you their grades. Ask them if they can say how they're doing in a particular course, what they're struggling with, what they're doing really well with. If a student is struggling and you're not quite sure how to support, help them prioritize the big learning opportunities. With this switch to standards-based grading, we're not as concerned with, the one daily worksheet that is done in class. We're really concerned about the big learning opportunities, those summative assessments, and helping students move towards showing their knowledge. And that can sometimes be a conversation with a guide or helping a student start that conversation with their guides about what should I prioritize if I'm struggling. And then asking students to look at their work plans. It will be a general expectation that all students have a weekly work plan, whether it's digital or physical. And we're going to be working with that in advisory and indie work. So if you want to ask how your student is doing, you can say, can you show me your work plan, or what are you working on this week? That's a nice way to also kind of have that involvement. Just a quick time check. David, we're here until 7:15, is that right?
Yes, but the next thing doesn't start till not 7:30. So we do have a little
Okay.
time for questions.
Okay, great. I'll try and go through some of these slides quickly, and the stuff that I maybe don't need to give as much explanation for, it can just be the slide and we can have questions. So this is what the grading scale actually looks like in the 1 to 7 scale. So in Schoology, it will be seen as a 1 through a 7 for their assignments, and that corresponds to an area of concern, limited proficiency, nearing proficiency, proficient, mastery, and exceeding mastery, which we have decided equates to an F or a D, a C, a B, an A or an A minus, or a strong A. D is considered passing at our school. Proficiency is the thing that we're always shooting for all students. On the side here, there are also some descriptors for general language about what a 1 means, what a 4 means, what a 6 means. And we've developed a lot of that language from IB, because they do a lot of work with this 1 to 7 scale as well. I'll mention just really quickly that Schoology is the learning management system that we use. All students have access to Schoology. This is where they'll get any digital versions of the assignments that they're given. They'll also get it in class, but parents will also have access to Schoology, and that information should be sent out in September. We recommend turning on overdue notifications so you can see when a student might have missed something to help notify them when they need to get caught back up. Thinking about how often you should check this, thinking back to that grading gap, I would recommend not looking at it more than once a week, if that. It is because it is a human inputted system, meaning like people are actually putting stuff in there. It's not just sort of automatically inputted. There is that gap, and so we just have to be aware that it takes a little bit of time for guides to grade stuff. I think that's all I want to say there. Yes, let's spend some time here. Let's talk about COVID safety. I'm sure many people are thinking about this as we're moving into the school year and wondering what has GRS already been thinking about and what plans are already in place. So I'm going to give you sort of a general overview, but there is also this document called the GRS Safe Learning Plan, which is highlighted right on our GRS website on the front page, which has much more detail about our safe return to school plan. I'll say in general, masks are one of the biggest things we're going to be emphasizing. They are required on buses. They are required in classrooms. It needs to be tight fitting, and it needs to be something that they can wear throughout the day. We are asking students to be hand washing whenever they are before or after eating, whenever they're touching their mask, that sort of stuff, regular hand washing and regular hand washing reminders. Distancing when we're able to. We are a small school, but we can make some changes in classrooms to have students spread out a little bit for when they're in classes and when they're having lunch. For quarantining, there is a decision tree that we are following from the Minnesota Department of Health about when somebody needs to quarantine. There is a lot of detail there, so maybe I'll just say that it does exist, unless David, unless you want us to really talk specifically about that right now. But just for the sake of time, I would say that decision tree tells us very specifically when somebody would need to quarantine or be away from school. And also our GRS Safe Learning Plan also has some really specific detail about that as well. In terms of if in the off chance that somebody needs to quarantine, the way that Schoology works, it allows for us to give a lot of information to students if they're not at school. So in the off chance that we have a very small number of students who have to quarantine, we'll be perceiving that as sort of in the same way that we support students who have to be away from school for a vacation or a family event. We support those students by having really clear information on Schoology. And if they want to check in with a phone call or a Zoom call, we could also do that. If we are going to a large group, which in this case would probably be the entire upper adolescent because of the way the adolescent is structured, then we would make a decision as an entire school to do that. And it would be very clearly communicated what that would look like. But we would still be using Schoology as our major mode for sharing information about classes and content. In terms of testing and vaccinations, we do recommend that everyone who is able to get a vaccination, a COVID-19 vaccination. Testing, I believe, will be available at school when we're able to get that set up. And then also for lunches. Lunch is the most risky time for us because it's the time when students don't have their mask on because they're going to be eating or drinking. And so the decisions we've made around that are to prioritize outside lunch when possible, and we have outdoor spaces available for students. And if students are eating inside, to have those as silent as possible. I know it might sound sort of like a joke to say to a bunch of adolescents, you have to be quiet during lunch, but it's something that allows us to keep one of our main goals, which is in-person learning for the entire school year. So we all have a vested interest in that. And also, we don't have to be totally silent in a big room. We can have podcasts and movies and do things together, but just not speaking, because that is one of the ways that the spread of COVID-19 can happen. David, is there anything else you want to add to this?
I don't have any specifics. I bet there's specific questions that will come up from audience members, which is great. We'll try to answer as many as we can. The only thing I'll say is that the Safe Return to School plan and the website, we're constantly updating. It's a living document that changes. And if anyone is interested in participating in the development of that document and in the work that's taking place around supporting the school and making these decisions, we do have a pandemic advisory team that anyone can join. So just reach out to me if you're interested.
Thank you, David. All right. I do want to talk about the specific support that we provide by POC students. That stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Person of Color. So there is a student survey that's going to be coming out. There's a group called the BIPOC Advisory Committee. There are several staff members who help out with that. Cassie in the elementary and Anu Dean in the upper adolescent. And they, over the summer, put together a couple surveys that they want some help with. They want to know what students want to do to explore their identity at school. What are some activities or things that they like doing? When I talked to Anu just the other day, she was saying, we want to think about, there's this tension. We want to specifically support students of color as we're able to, but we don't want to isolate anybody. So we want to find that healthy balance of support and making sure that we're not feeling like we're isolating somebody from the larger group. And so that's part of what this survey is about, is helping us figure out some things we can do. There is integrated support through our entire school week and school year. On Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays during the lunch period, there's a BIPOC lunch that is supported from Anu Dean. So it's a time for students to get together. If you just want to have lunch, if there's a particular topic that wants to be talked about, that's what happens at those times. And that happens in the upper humanities room, which I think is 278, if there's any students in the room or in the Zoom call. There are also optional check-ins with our new student wellness and equity coordinator, Asha Erler. They're new this year, and their role for our school is specifically to support student wellness, and that includes specifically supporting students of color. So if that's a connection you want to make and have a regular check-in during independent work time or some other kind of time, that is also an option. And then also, I'll just say generally, culturally relevant pedagogy is something that we talk specifically about with guides. It is a framework for education for us to understand how to make education culturally relevant, how to make sure that the content that you're delivering is relevant to all cultures, and so that students are feeling like they can see themselves in the curriculum. That's something we talk about very specifically. We can always improve that, but it is something that we think very deeply about as a staff. And then just an invitation, if families or caregivers would like to join the BIPOC Advisory Committee, Anu Dean is the best person to reach out to. And I've got her email here. Real quick, the school supply list was sent out, but if you need it again, it can be found right here. I'll say that generally there's a few small kind of specific things, but generally having notebooks, having folders, having pens and pencils are going to be the main thing. If there's any need that you have or any support that you have, please reach out. We can provide school supplies. And bring your school supplies to the first day of school. We'll have an opportunity for students to get to their lockers and organize their stuff on the first day of school. And that brings us then to, where do I go and what do I do on the first day of school, Tuesday, September 7th? First off, make sure you bring a mask. It is required that all people in the building at Great River are wearing a mask at all times unless they're eating or drinking. So bring one. If you forget one, there are masks at the front entrance, the north entrance, and the south entrance that are free to take. Bring a water bottle. All the drinking fountains have been locked so that we're not spreading germs. And so bring a water bottle so you can fill up your water bottle and drink it throughout the day. Bring your school supplies so you can organize your locker. We won't begin our regular full week of our weekly schedule, that daily schedule I showed you, until September 20th, because we'll be doing some student orientation scheduling, and then we'll be having those fall community building trips the second week of school, and then we'll begin our regular daily schedule the 20th. But you will get your schedules on September 3rd. They'll be emailed out to you. Lastly, just a reminder that we need caregivers' help. So if you're in a place to be giving that kind of help to the school, the parent engagement group is a fantastic place to connect. They are a group of parents and families who do all sorts of things for the school. And they're a great place to put your energy and your time to helping the school become a great place. There is the Facebook group, the GRS, I think this should have been changed. It's GRS Upper Adolescent. And look for more information coming out from PEG soon. And then also the BIPOC Advisory Committee is a great place to share your talents. Anything else, David or Stacy, to mention here?
I don't think so. We do have some questions and we've only got about 7 minutes to answer them. Are you kind of at your end?
I believe we are, yes.
Great. I'm going to try to group questions that are like questions. The one question is about lunch. There's two of them. Will a half-hour lunch allow students enough time to stand in line and eat if they want GRS lunches? And then a second question asked, is talking allowed during lunch?
The first question about, is there enough time? In the years past, LA and UA were eating lunch at the same time and would create a very long line. That won't be the case this year because UA is eating at a separate time. The way that lunch works is you're going to be ordering beforehand from school. We'll be having hot lunch 2 days a week and then cold lunch the rest of the days of the week. And I think actually available all days of the week. And you'll pick up the lunch from the gym, which is just across the lunchroom, and then you go to whatever space you want to be in. In terms of talking, you can whisper to somebody, but I guess I'll go back to sort of the purpose of it. The purpose of it is that we're not spreading our particles from our mouth when we speak to each other. If we're unmasked, that's a risk about possibly spreading particles to each other. So it is in our best interest not to speak. If you really want to speak and have a conversation with somebody, go to the outside space. That would be the best choice.
Okay, there's a few questions about key experiences. Maybe you answered these questions already in your presentation, but what are we doing instead of key experiences, day trips by grade level, but what would those trips include? And then, yeah, start with that one.
Sure. So because of the switch, we're making changes literally as we speak. We did it today. We're going to be working on it for the rest of the week. But some general plans are going to be a couple off-campus things. Possibly going to a farm, possibly going to a sculpture garden, some metro things such as possibly going to museums or going to different cultural locations around the Twin Cities, and then doing some stuff at school, working in the garden, working on some identity curriculum, and doing different team building, community building things. So that was a very general answer, but it's going to be a mix of those things.
Someone asked, what about students who have jobs under other outside responsibilities and they can't take time off for the ones that go past 310? And then an additional question was from a student who is Jewish and asked about the trips. One of the dates is over Yom Kippur and wondering what they would do if they cannot attend.
Sure. If you can't attend any of these days, it would be the same sort of process as if you couldn't attend any other school day. You would have a caregiver call to school and excuse you for that day. If it's specifically for that extended daytime, there's a possibility we could put you in another group for that day so that you could do some kind of activity with your peers. Or there might be a possibility that we can, if there's a large group of people who need to get back to school or get back from their thing, we could work on some carpools. So I would say if it's a specific question about that, maybe talk to me and I'll see what we can figure out to see if there are other people in that same situation.
Yeah, and specifically for the student who asked about Yom Kippur, it's hard for we do think about those things when we make the planning, but it's very difficult for us to plan around religious observances that aren't federal holidays. And so if we plan around one, then we kind of have to plan around them all, and it gets really challenging. So we do think about it, and we will continue to think about it. If you have more questions, you can talk to David about it too, and what our plans are going forward about that. Adam, did you say when the BIPOC group will meet, the students?
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday during lunch.
Kelly, you asked, do we need med forms if our students don't need meds during school from the 10 to 6 p.m. time frame? If what we do want, if your kids don't have, they take their nighttime med at home and they aren't going to be sleeping overnight at this place, then that's fine. We don't need those forms, but we do like to have the form for the non-prescription meds, because if your student gets stung by a bee or gets some other rash, like it's nice to be able to give them Benadryl to help take care of that, but we can't do that unless we have the form signed by your doctor and by yourself. And that includes things like Tylenol or Midol or ibuprofen or any type of over-the-counter med like that. We can't give it to your student unless we have a doctor's signature. So that is the form we'd really like everybody to fill out and get done prior to these day trips, just because it's nice to have on hand. Otherwise, your student just might be uncomfortable or need to go home early if it's a thing Benadryl would fix, but we can't do it. Could you speak to how assignments will be posted? Will the assignments be posted consistently from course to course, from guide to guide? For example, all in PDFs and Words, links, etc.?
We don't have any expectations around the specific format that guides post things. If you're having serious problems opening that on your home technology, talk to your guide and say, can I get a PDF version or a Word version of this? We do have expectations around, some very basic expectations around posting assignments on the day that they're due, having a Schoology folder for all of the assignments so that they can be in one place, and a Schoology folder for all of the resources for that unit, and then a folder for all the past resources. But guides also, we want to give them freedom to do the things that they're really good at too. And so there are other ways that they can incorporate technology to make their course interesting and engaging. And so we're just giving those basic expectations. If there's something that's getting in the way of your learning and you want to start working to maybe propose something, one, talk to your guide, who's a human being who is also struggling with technology, and see if maybe you can come to a plan together. If it's something that becomes a problem or even a possible solution that we can talk about, could be brought up at a community meeting, or you can talk to me and we can see if we can come up with a plan.
Adam, on the first day of school, will they go to advisory first?
Yes, they will go to advisory first.
Great. Where do we find the over-counter drug form to complete? It's on the forms section of our website under current families. And I believe we're sending out this presentation along with the video, and we can include the forms again too for you via email. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm struggling with a 9-month-old puppy here. She's tired of me working. Is there any talk about requiring vaccinations for UA? And then another question about vaccinations is, do we have any sense of how many of our adolescent students have been vaccinated? It's my understanding from the CDC or MDH that those who are vaccinated are no longer required to quarantine, nor are those close contacts who were masked during contact. Is that part of GRS policies? David will probably take this one.
Yeah, I could speak to those. So we are unable at this time to require vaccinations for students under basically in that 15 to 17 range, because of the nature of how the vaccination has been approved by the FDA specifically. It's still not under full approval, none of the vaccinations for young people specifically. So until that legal status changes, it's a conversation we will likely be having at some point, but it is not something that we can legally require at this time. As far as different quarantining, you're right, there are, and we're trying to follow the CDC quarantine guidelines as closely as we can. But there are some specific examples. For example, someone who is vaccinated but has someone living in their household who's test positive for coronavirus may be quarantining even though that they've been vaccinated. And there are some specific guidelines along those lines. And we also want to leave our guidelines open to contact tracing to sort of, ask these questions. Have you been vaccinated? Have you not? What does that look like? Who have you been in contact with? Because we just don't know what the situation is going to exactly entail and look like. And so, we're gonna be making those calls, following as closely as we can that MDH decision-making guideline tree. And also, it's hard to know exactly what situations are going to look like. So we've tried to leave it open to some flexibility as well. But we are following the CDC guidelines that do say that students who are vaccinated are, really not as likely to be quarantined in many ways. So it is certainly an advantage to getting vaccinated. We're encouraging everyone to being vaccinated, that you'd be less likely to be quarantined.
Great. For those of you who are ninth grade parents just joining us, we're just finishing up the last couple questions for the upper adolescent panel, and then we will move on to ninth grade just shortly. There's a couple questions about advisory, but first I'm going to let Adam answer the question about an option for leaving campus for lunch.
Yes, off-campus lunch is available for 11th and 12th graders. There is a form to be filled out. I believe it is somewhere on the website, but I'll make sure that it's shared during advisory on the first day of school, or at least in the first week.
So the few questions about advisories I see is like, will the groups be the same as last year? Or will students shift around? Some students knowing that an advisor left this year and wondering if they'll be in the same group. Adam, I believe we added an advisor this year, correct? So we added a whole other advisor. So we had to pull students from each advisory to fill that new advisory spot. So there is a chance that you may not be in the same group as you were last year, even if your advisor guide is still at Great River. So there is a chance that has happened. And you'll find out your advisor and this is another question I've seen, when I send the schedules to students. So I do an email merge. It's a lot of information that we try to send all at once and try to get it as accurate as possible. I'm about 94% there, but that last 6% is taking forever. So I'm hoping, my goal is by Friday, the end of the day. And by end of the day, that literally could be midnight, or worst case scenario, I get up with my crazy puppy and try to do it on Saturday morning, but I am really aiming for Friday. The students will be getting the email directly from me at your school email. If you are a new student to Great River School, an email will go to your parents instead because you don't have a school email just yet. And then I'm also going to send an email to parents just saying, hey, your students got an email with their schedule. Please ask them to check it. That'll tell your advisor as well as how your schedule will look. And there will be an online form for you to fill out if you need to request class change requests. And we can't always honor them, but we will try the best we can. Specific dates for key experiences this fall. I think more information is coming next week on that, Adam, right? Like the specific day trips.
The specific dates are the 14th through the 17th.
Yep.
Tuesday the 14th through Friday the 17th of September.
Can you give an average of how many hours of homework students will be expected to complete nightly or weekly?
The student family handbook outlines roughly 2 hours a day. Students will have roughly 5.5 hours of indie work over the course of the week. I would say it's not like it's always going to be 2 hours. So sometimes you get that 2 hours and sometimes you get it easier. Sometimes you're able to get all your work done at indie work. Sometimes you need to do a little extra work on the outside of school hours. Yeah.
Great. And one final question, and it'll be pertinent to ninth grade families too, so we might as well just do it if you're here for that. Are you requiring the vaccination for staff and faculty? And Adam, if you want to leave, you may at this point. David will answer this question.
Thank you, Adam, definitely. So yes, so at this time, we're having conversations about it. What I can say is that the state of Minnesota is not yet requiring teachers and staff to have vaccinations. Some districts are having conversations about this, specifically St. Paul Public Schools opened it up at their board meeting last night as a proposal and are voting on it this Friday specifically. We have a special board meeting on Thursday, and part of what we're talking about is the COVID safe return to school plan. And now that we do have full FDA approval for adults taking the vaccination, we're in a different sort of legal status. And so we're having those conversations right now, but there isn't currently a requirement. And that's kind of what I should probably say. It will wind up being a board decision.
All right. Thank you, all of the upper adolescent folks for joining us. We need to move on to the 9th grade presentation now.